एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम 3 और क्वेश्चंस डिस्कस करेंगे प्रोलॉग टू द कैंटरबरी टेल्स से रिलेटेड। पिछले वीडियो में हमने 3 क्वेश्चंस डिस्कस किए थे जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है। चलिए आज के वीडियो स्टार्ट करते हैं। Question: Write a note on the ecclesiastical characters in the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales, or in what light does Chaucer represent the Christian clergy in his general prologue to the Canterbury Tales? There are 7 ecclesiastical characters dealt with by Chaucer in the general prologue, not counting the nun and the chaplain in attendance upon the prioress. These 7 ecclesiastical characters, in the order in which they appear before us, are the prioress, the monk, the friar, the clerk of Oxford, the parson, and the summoner, and the pardoner. It may be pointed out at the very outset that Chaucer presents the clergymen of his times in a most unfavourable light. The only ecclesiastical character whom Chaucer admires and whom we admire also are the clerk and the parson, for whom the author has nothing but praise. The other characters belonging to the church are ridiculed and satirized. Chaucer exposes the follies, the absurdities, the monetary greed, the hypocrisy, and on the whole the irreligious nature of these men of religion. Indeed, we feel greatly depressed and dismayed by the spectacle of these clergymen, who are not only most worldly minded but dishonest, immoral, and corrupt. It is the abundance of humor in the portrayal of these parsons that relieves the depression and dissolves it in laughter. When we consider that the character of the men of religion all over the world, even today, is no better than it was in Chaucer's time, we are driven to the conclusions that human nature has not changed much since then, and that religion has through the centuries served largely as a cloak for the nefarious activities of unscrupulous people who resort to a religious profession to promote their own selfish ends. The prioress comes first. A study of the conditions prevailing in Chaucer's time would show that Chaucer created this prioress straight from his own world. She corresponds to the characters of prioress as they were in the 14th century. True to type, this prioress is essentially well read, but she is also individualized. She has a romantic name, Eglantine, having probably led a life of refinement in her early years. She still indulges in certain vanities, which of course belonged either wholly or in part to many nuns of Chaucer's time. A prioress was not expected to swear at all, but Eglantine swears by Saint Loy, the 7th century courtier turned saint. Eglantine is depicted as having exaggeratedly good table manners, for as Chaucer says, she always takes pains to imitate the manners of court life. She speaks fluent French, and although it is not Parisian French, it is still French and hence aristocratic. Eglantine is not always careful about obeying the rules of her position. Nuns were forbidden to go on pilgrimage by 14th century bishops, yet they frequently did so, and Eglantine is among Chaucer's pilgrims. Nuns were also forbidden to keep pets of any kind, yet Eglantine possesses little dogs upon whom she lavishes affection and care, even feeding them with meat and expensive white bread. Eglantine is personally vain. Her appearance is important to her, for she displays too much of her broad forehead to the world, and she cannot hide her love of jewelry. Her rosary is too elaborate for a nun, and the brooch she wears, bearing an ambiguous motto, "Love conquers all," sacred or profane love, should not be worn by a nun. But even though Chaucer does censure the prioress for her vanities and for her disregard of the rules, the blame is extremely mild. The poet makes her quite charming, though through her graceful femininity may not be tolerated by those who are strictly religious. The monk is also satirically portrayed. He contemptuously ignores the vows he has taken to uphold the rules of monastic discipline laid down by Saint Maurice and Saint Benedict. His greatest pleasure is in hunting the hare, which was thought to be wicked, especially for the clergyman. He neither labors with his hands nor pores over a book in the cloister. No, indeed, on the contrary, he remarks scornfully, "Let Austin have his swing to him reserved. The monk does not fast or deny himself costly garments. Instead, he loves a fat swan, the best of any roast. He wears the finest grey fur in the land, an elaborate gold pin in the shape of a love knot, and costly supple boots. He is an outsider. That is, he leaves his cloister, and Chaucer reminds greyhounds, which are and Chaucer reminds us that a monk outside the cloister is like a fish out of water. He owns greyhounds, which are swift as birds, and in his stable and are many valuable horses. Thus, Chaucer's monk is a lively representative of his class. On the other hand, however, Chaucer gives the portrait added vitality and strength to a few individual touches. The monk has large, prominent eyes and a glistering, ruddy face. He is bald and stout, and his pomposity and implied resentment against the world are manifest. Although he is able to be an abbot, he is only a prior, a manly man to be an abbotable. The friar is at once a representative of his class and very much himself. To begin with, he is a limiter, that is, a friar who has secured the begging rights in a specified area. He knows how to induce all the women in that area to give him money or food in response to his delusions. Obviously, he has a way with them. His English is sweet upon his tongue, as he has affected a lisp. He knows all the latest songs with which he entertains the fair wives. While he accompanies himself upon a harp, he rewards the wives with the handsome presents of ornamental knives and pins, and his initial blessing of each house he visits is pleasantly satisfying. He uses the words in principle. When he visits richer or more important people, his manner changes. He is now courteous and humble. He is only too ready to hear confessions and to sell absolution for money, which is, of course, his greatest sin. He has other faults too. He will have nothing to do with lepers or with the poor. He will deal only with those who can be a source of profit to him in some way, the wealthy, the seller of food, the barmaids, and in taverns. He meddles or also in civil affairs, for on love days he acts as an arbitrator to settle disputes and make money by this means too. The summoner is basically wicked. He will teach a sinner not to feel afraid of the archdeacon's curse, which is excommunication, because money, he says, will set everything right. The summoner also sees to it that he has all the young people of the parish under his thumb, as he knows their secret and acts as their advisor, and we can well imagine that he turns them into informers against their elders. The summoner will readily excuse a fellow for keeping a mistress for a year. If he has given only a quart of wine, he is sexually immoral himself, because he can take advantage of a girl full privily. A Finch egg coat he pull. The partner, we are told, has come straight from the papal court at Rome, and he bears a bag full of pardons. We would naturally question the authenticity of these pardons, about which Chaucer speaks in a humorous vein. The partner carries with him as relics a pillowcase which he claims to be a part of the Virgin's veil, and a piece of cloth which he claims to be a part of sail of St. Peter's boat. He also has a cross made of brass but studded with gems, and some pig's bones which he will claim are a saint's relics. He befools people and the parish priest and makes more money in one day through his preaching than the priest receives in 2 months. But Chaucer has to acknowledge that his partner is a non ecclesiastical in church. If this is not ironically said, it means that the partner's preaching is so eloquent that the congregation is much impressed by him, and that the effect he creates forces his listeners to give him as much silver as he wants. The clerk and the parson are, as you already been said above, are worthy of our respect and admiration. The clerk has been a devoted student of logic, and he would rather have 20 volumes of Aristotle than rich robes or a fiddle. His outer coat is threadbare, for he is extremely poor. Even his horse is as lean as a rake. What money he receives from his benefactors he spends on books and learnings, and he repays the benefactors and he pays the benefactors by heartfelt prayers for their souls. He never displays unseemly levity in behavior. He does not speak one word more than is necessary. When he does speak, he is brief to the point and always noble in his meaning. He is glad to learn and glad to teach. The parson is rich in holy thoughts and work and devoutly teaches his parishioners the gospel of Christ. He is learned, for he has been a university student. He has proved himself to be patient, diligent, and benign. He will not excommunicate a man who is genuinely unable to meet the 10% tax, the tithe, levied by the church on every parishioner. In fact, the parson would give the poor parishioners money from his own income to enable them to meet their obligations. This good man is not lazy or given to idle pleasure. On the contrary, in all kinds of weather, and even if he is ill, he visits on foot to the members of his parish in their houses, not caring whether they are rich or poor. But perhaps his most striking characteristic as a priest is his setting an example. Before asking others to act nobly, he emphasizes two facts. If gold rusts, iron will do far worse, and if shepherd is foul, the sheep cannot be clean. The parson will not leave his parishioners to sink in the mire in order that he may make more money by running off to London to become a chantry priest or to seek a position in some guild. He was a shepherdier and not a mercenary. Although he is good himself, the parson is not scornful or contemptuous when dealing with the repentant sinners, but equally important, he does not hesitate to reprimand anyone who shows no repentance. Totally unlike the friar, the parson treats those of high or low position in exactly the same way. Self advancement never occurs to him. In short, the picture which Chaucer draws of this holy and humble man is extraordinarily appealing in its uncomplicated goodness. We may venture to say that Chaucer knew such a man in actual life, and that the character of the parson is not a mere reversal of the bad priest whom he has described in the prologue. चलिए हम नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन डिस्कस करते हैं. Show how Chaucer's pilgrims are portrayed in the prologue at once as types and as individuals, or each pilgrim is at once a fully realized individual and a representative of his class or his profession. Illustrate from the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. All the characters presented in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales are the individuals, and at the same time they are morally and socially representative. Discuss or how does Chaucer individualize his pilgrims in the prologue? Characters are said to be types when they conform to the general conception that we have of them as representatives of the class or the profession to which they belong. Thus, if a lawyer is depicted as cunning and dishonest, he will be regarded as a type because this is what people generally think of lawyers to be. Characters are regarded as individuals when they possess certain traits of their own to distinguish them from others of the same class of profession. Thus, if a lawyer has gardening as his hobby, it is an individual trait which may not be shared by other lawyers. If we talk of a lawyer in terms of his particular hobby, we are talking of him as an individual. If we talk of a lawyer in terms of his profession, cunning and dishonesty, we are talking of him as a type. But if we consider him both in relation to his professional cunning and dishonesty and to his particular hobby, we are talking of him both as a type and as an individual. The characters in Chaucer's prologue to the Canterbury Tales are both types and individuals, and there lies Chaucer's greatness as a creator of characters. In portraying the various characters, Chaucer dwells upon the qualities which the reader would expect them to possess by virtue of the class of society or the profession of which they are members. But at the same time, Chaucer also adds certain characteristics which have nothing to do with them as members of their class or profession and which distinguish them from other members of their class or profession, thus lending them an individuality These characteristics generally pertain to the appearance, the dress, and the personal habits of the pilgrims. To illustrate this, let us first consider some of the secular characters. The knight must be taken up first. Evidently, Chaucer presents his knight as a real representative of the code of behavior which prevailed in those days among members of the class of society. Knights were required to be wise, provident, just, and pure. They were expected to serve Christianity against the infidels and the barbarians. They were not only uh, to be the champions of the church but also protector of the weak and the exemplars of moral virtue. There is no doubt that Chaucer's knights fulfill all these conditions. At the same time, this knight possesses certain individual characteristics. Thus, he is in his manner modest as a maiden. His garments are not gaudy, and he wears a giping doublet of coarse cloth. Similarly, the squire possesses the qualities which were generally associated with persons of his kind. The squire has distinguished himself in battles and he carves before his father at the table. But we think of him as an individual, not as a square. When we are told that he was an average height, that he could compose songs, that he could dance and draw and write and wear. His love sickness is also an individual quality, though to some extent it may be regarded as something typically of all young squires. The yeoman is truly a member of his class in carrying a sword, a buckler, a dagger, a horn, and a mighty bow. But Chaucer lends him an individual quality by telling us that he wore the medal of St. Christopher on his breast. The doctor is perfectly true to type. He is grounded in astronomy, administers remedies at the opportune moments according to the stars. He knows all the standards medical textbooks. He is in league with the clients, with the chemists, but he is also individualized. He is clad in blood red and blue grey, and he is slow in spending, having kept whatever he earned during the plague. He loves gold, specially for gold and medicine is a cordial. Though this is a both are typical and an individual characteristic, the reeve is clever in maintaining a granary. He can predict the harvest by the drought and by the rain. His collections on behalf of his lord are not in arrears. He has accumulated private wealth by cheating his lord and so on. But he is individualized also. He is slender and choleric. His beard is shaven as close as possible. His legs are very long and lean like a stick. There are two characters who are highly individualized, which is what is typical about them is very little as compared to what is distinctive. These two characters are the miller and the wife of Bath. In the case of the miller, Chaucer puts a lot of emphasis on his physical appearance. He's stout with powerful muscles and large bones. He is thickly built and can break open a door by striking his head against it. On the tip of his nose, he has a wart on which grows a tuft of red hair. The general effect of this description is one of robust physique. Well could he steal corn and charge treble, and yet he had a thumb of gold. This was applicable to most millers of the time. The wife of Bath, one of Chaucer's most famous characters, is individualized by her deafness, her scarlet stockings, and her large hips. She is a gap-toothed and has an amorous nature, easily deducible from her gap-toothedness, which is seen in her having had several lovers in her youth and having married as many as 5 husbands, one after the other. She knows the remedies of love, and in company or she can laugh and joke. She appears before us vividly when we go through Chaucer's description of these characteristics. But even she has something typical about her. As a housewife, she has acquired much skill as a weaver. She will not tolerate any woman going to her collection box before her, and she has an excellent record as a pilgrim, having already visited some shrines. It may, however, be pointed out that some people would consider even these flatter qualities to be individual characteristics and not those of our whole class. Even socially unimportant characters like the cook and the shipman have their individual characteristics. The cook is, of course, professionally an expert, but he has a weakness for ale and he has an ulcer on his shin. The shipman, too, is inferior to none as a sailor, but he is represented as finding some difficulty in managing his horse and is wearing a gown of coarse cloth reaching his knees. The merchant, who is socially important, is typical in so far as he makes money through usury and through illegal transactions, but no one knows that he is in debt. His being in debt is an individual touch because not all merchants are in that state. Two of the secular characters are entirely to be regarded as types with hardly any individual trait. They are the lawyer and the manciple. The lawyer has extensive knowledge of legal cases. He can expertly draw, read, or draft a document. He has acquired much land property by unfair means, and he seems busier than he actually is. All the characteristics of this lawyer were to be found in most members of the legal profession of the time. The manciple is represented as an expert in buying provisions, always to his advantage, whether for cash or on credit, and he has the brains to outwit all the 60 men under whom he serves. Most manciples of the time were of this kind. Almost every line of the brief sketch of the manciple could be applied to the whole class of manciples of the time. Then there are the ecclesiastical characters. Here also, almost every portrait is a combination of typical and individual characteristic. The prior speaks French fluently and elegantly, has acquired excellent table manners, knows the behavior of a court, is charitable and full of pity, and has a wimple neatly pleated. A study of the conditions prevailing in Chaucer's time would show her that Chaucer created this prior straight from 14th century world. True to type, this prioress is essentially well bred, but she is also individualized. She has a romantic name, Eglantine. She indulges in certain vein. She indulges in certain vanities. For instance, she keeps dogs as pets and lavishes great affection on them, feeding them with meat and bread. She wears a brooch which bears an ambiguous motto: love conquers all. The monk is true to type also. He ignores the rules of monastic discipline. He is fond of hunting the hare. He neither labors with his hands nor pores over a book in the cloister, and he loves a fat swan, the best of any roast. A large majority of the monks of the time were idlers and fond of a luxurious life. But this monk is individualized too. He wears an intricate pin of wrought gold in the shape of a love knot. He is fat and has a bald head which shines like glass. His eyes are sharp and roll in his head. The friar corresponds to the 14th century notions of a strife. He misuses his power of confession and absolution in order to make money. He carries knives and pins to give to fair women. He does not deal with the sick or the poor, but only with the rich and sellers of food. He makes money also by secular pursuits, such as settling disputes on love days. But he has his individual characteristics. He has a merry voice, can sing well, and can play on the fiddle. He is as strong as a champion. He lisps a little to make his English sweet upon the tongue. When he has sung a song, his eyes twinkle in his hair, as do the stars in the frosty night. The Southerner conforms to type in his rascality and his parade of his shallow knowledge of Latin. He tells people not to feel afraid of the Archdeacon's curse because, according to him, money can settle all such problems. He has won the confidence of the young people of his district, and being in the know of their secrets, act as their advisor. But he has been individualized by being represented as having a pimpled face, narrow eyes, and scabby black brows, so that children feel afraid of his visage. He loves garlic and onions and drinks strong wine. Red as blood, tolerant of immorality in others, he is immoral too, so far as he is capable of taking advantage of girl, full privily in a Finchick code he pulled. Thus he is made to appear as a distinctive character. The same is true of the partner. The main occupation of the medieval partners was the selling of indulgences, the remission of punishment to repentant sinners, as also the sale of religious relics. Being dishonest in the extreme, Chaucer's partner carries a bag full of bogus pardons come from Rome all hot, and he claims a pillowcase and a small piece of canvas to be the Virgin's veil and Peter's sail, respectively. He carries two pigs' bones, which he sells as the relics of saints. He is an eloquent preacher. All these are typical characteristics. His individual characteristics are his sparse hair, his shining eyes like a hare's, his voice, which is as tiny as a goat's, and his smooth, beardless cheeks. In conclusion, we may quote the following comment of a critic in this connection: the characters are chosen from all ranks of English society and they are delineated by a combination of typical traits and vivid individual details, recalling the methods of portrait painters in the later Middle Ages. Just as an artist in colors took care to indicate a knight's status by some detail like a hawk or on his wrist, and clerics on craftsmen by costumes and objects held in their hands. So Chaucer's first presence is pilgrims against the background of rank and profession, with the remarks about their position in these. Then, however, again like portrait painters, he proceeds to give the vivid detail, making each figure unforgettably distinct from all other of his class. We see the black-white nostrils of the miller and the hairy wart on his nose. We catch a glimpse of the wife of Bath's red stockings. We hear the sentimental exclamation of the prioress over her pet dogs and the singing of the young squire. We guess Chaucer's shrewd surmises about the partner's falsetto voice and the cook's source and the friar's helpfulness in marrying off poor village girls. The quiet irony and indirect statements sometimes convey very harsh facts, as when Chaucer let us know that a shipman is really a merciless predator. The poet does this not by forthright statement but by telling us that on capturing war prisoners on his armed ship, the shipman is accustomed to send them home by water, that is, to the cast them into the sea. Consider now the following question: show how Chaucer's character represent English society in real and recognition. In dealing with this question, the story should not should omit from the above answer all the characteristics that are individual and develop or amplify those which reveal the various persons as types. चलिए आज इस वीडियो का लास्ट क्वेश्चन डिस्कस करते हैं. शो विद द स्पेशल रेफरेंस टू द प्रोलॉग दैट चौसर वाज both a medievalist and a modern, write an essay on the modernity of Chaucer's poetry with special reference to the prologue. Chaucer was surely a medievalist, not only because he lived in the 14th century and shared its life, but also because he depicted the life of the Middle Ages in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. The very idea of a pilgrimage is medieval in conception. Pilgrimages to sacred shrines were frequent in those days. Groups of pilgrims used to travel together both for reasons of safety and because the pilgrims could in this way enjoy one another's company. And while every the time, one of the shrines most visited was that of St. Thomas in Canterbury, which is the destination of Chaucer's pilgrims. Chaucer is also a medievalist in so far as he shows his skill in storytelling. Chaucer's lyrical gifts was infinitely less than that of the great Elizabethans. The secular drama in which he would surely have excelled had not yet been invented. The only department of poetry open to his pursuit was that of storytelling. When we consider the sweetness of his early tales, the sum of his stories, and the vivid character sketches of the prologue, it is impossible to name another narrative English poet whose achievement can be matched against his. It has been said by a commentator that if we take 30% of Goldsmith, 50 of Fielding, and 20 of Walter Scott, and vitalize this compound with the spirit of the 14th century, we should get perhaps fairly near to another Chaucer. Chaucer faithfully depicts the social conditions of his time. Not only does he describe the members of various professions and trades, but he also gives us a fair idea of the food habits, the dress, and the entertainments of his time. If we were to write a social history of England in the 14th century, the prologue would prove very helpful to us. Indeed, Chaucer gives us a microcosm of English society in the prologue. He throws a lot of light on both the secular and the ecclesiastical life of the period. The knight, the squire, the yeoman represent the agricultural feudalism of the time. The doctor, the lawyer, the municipal, and the merchant, the wife of Bath, and the five guildsmen represent the new urban class which had come into existence mainly in London. The prioress, the monk, the friar, the clerk, the parson, the summoner, and the partner are ecclesiastical figures through whom Chaucer conveys both the good and the bad sides, but largely the bad of the religion of the day. Chaucer's choice of Pilgrims takes us into medieval towns as well as country places. Only the royal court and the higher nobility are not presented, as they would not have joined a common pilgrimage. As for the dress of this period, the pilgrims wear the distinctive clothes of the class of society to which they belong or the vocation which they pursue. Chaucer also gives us a clear idea of the commercialism and mercenary mentality of the people of that time, and in this respect the modern age is no better. Barring a few of the characters, the knight, the squire, the clerk, the parson and the plowman, the pilgrims value money and gold above everything else, and their lives are governed by their desire to accumulate wealth. Not even the ecclesiastical characters are free from their materialistic greed. In short, Chaucer represents the life of the English people at the time, and his work reflects not only his own intimable genius but the spirit, tastes, and feelings of his age. But there are several elements of modernity in Chaucer. The prologue illustrates most of them. Chaucer's modernity in the prologue consists in his realistic portraits of character, indulging a sympathetic representation of the common life of the people, his objectivity and detachment, and his treatment of life and character, his irony and satire, and the conversational or colloquial note of his style. Popular literature till Chaucer's time has been occupied mainly with the gods and heroes of a golden age, but Chaucer attempted the new realistic task of portraying men and women as they were, and to describe them so that the readers recognize them as their own neighbors. His characters are recognizable as true to life, and they have for this reason become a permanent possession of English literature. Beowulf and Roland are idle heroes, essentially figures of the fancy, but the merry host of the tabard and Madame Eglantine, the fat monk, the parish priest, the kindly plowman, the poor clerk, these strike us more like personal acquaintances than characters in a book. Chaucer is the first English writer to bring the atmosphere of romantic interest about the men and women and the daily work of one's own world, which is the aim of nearly all modern literature. Chaucer's realism is indeed strikingly modern. Chaucer gives us in the prologue a picture of contemporary English life, its work and play, its deeds and dreams, its fun and sympathy, and its hard joy of living, such as no other single work of literature does. The prologue shows how keenly and yet kindly the first modern English poet observed his fellow men. There's such a variety of character that Dryden remarked, "Here is God's plenty." Although Chaucer deals with medieval material, yet he has a surprisingly modern way of looking at life. While Chaucer's work be regarded together, it shows his progressive advance towards truth. He found poetry remote from nature, its essence being fiction, in the accepted belief, while its task was the ingenious transposition of reality in accordance with artificial rules. In the beginning, Chaucer submitted to the received code, dreamt with his contemporaries like them, had visions of allegorical figures and combined imaginary incidents, or he sought the material for his poetry in books, borrowing his subjects and characters. Then by degrees he reached a point where he thought nothing as interesting and as diverse as nature herself, pushing his books into the background, writing himself entirely of the allegory and the dream. He looked face to face at the spectacle of man and set himself to reproduce it directly. He made himself a painter of life. We might therefore say that Chaucer's poetry, especially the Canterbury Tales and the prologue to his work, ends the Middle Ages and inaugurates modern English poetry. Not only that, Chaucer shows a wide sympathy. The prologue clearly illustrates this. For some of his fellow men, Chaucer feels affection or respect, for instance, the knight, the parson, and the plowman. About all others, he has so much curiosity that he feels interested in him. As he is not easily repelled, no one is excluded from his interest, nor does he feel bitter. There is no bitterness in his portraits of even the summoner and the partner, who are contemptible fellows. He loves the world's variety and feels grateful to human defects because they differ from human virtues. In portraying characters, Chaucer has no axe to grind. He does not show any marked ethical intentions. He is not a social reformer. While his portrayal of characters is sympathetic, it shows his objectivity or detachment, which is another modern characteristic. He is not an egoist and he does not trust his own preferences and prejudices upon us. Chaucer's irony and satire are also among his modern characteristics. Most of the portraits in the prologue are satirical, with irony as the writer's most powerful weapon. Chaucer exposes the vanities and absurdities of the priors, the worldliness of the monk and the friar, the greed of the summoner, the hypocrisy and the frauds of the pardoner. The exposure is effected through the use of irony in each case, and there is no direct criticism or denunciation. The prologue also lays the foundations of later comic fiction. Furthermore, the wife of Bath is portrayed in such a way as to anticipate Shakespeare's Falstaff. The conversational tone that Chaucer employs in the prologue is noteworthy too. Chaucer frequently employs a phrase to remind us that we are listening to a storyteller's speaking voice of not folk with the was the city of which I tell, or full faith was her cloak as I was wore. The same trick is at work in those conversational casual phrases such as this is to sing and forethought, as we might say, you see or get this. The effect is not of reading a dead poem, but is of listening to a living, spontaneous voice. Chaucer also likes to give his characters popular phrases. Thus, the monk laughs at the text or rule of his monastic order. He yaps not of that text pulled hen and later, but thy text healed in that worth an oyster, and we feel the emitted downright quality of the monk's mind through his speech, says a critic. Chaucer's style and direction have except where a higher key is wanted, a corresponding informality in his colloquial style and mood. And in his combining of ironic suggestion with concrete precision, Chaucer is a very modern writer. Another commentator, speaking of the true Chaucerian essays, says, and surely this essence is to be found in his veritable modernity, the quality by which he leaps clearly out of his century and speaks to us and as men and women. He speaks to us as one who loved and responded instantly to the freshness and beauty of nature in lasting delight and instruction afforded by books, as one who enjoyed the comedy of manners, the perennial and indefinable fascination of woman, the pathos and transience of love, and the consolations of philosophy and religion, as one who relished the absurdities of scholarly pretension and saw the need for a fresh, lively, and questioning attitude to all conventions and received opinions. To sum up, we may quote yet another critic who said Chaucer is a vivid reporter of his contemporary scene, a creator of living characters, a humorist and ironist of the first order. He is a remarkable manipulator of words, a poet whose mind raged over problems of poetry, of history, science, philosophy, and religion. He was at the forefront of the imaginative and intellectual culture of his times. He is our goat, a great artist who put his whole mind into his art. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद है। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं, और अगर कोई सजेशंस या कोई डाउट्स है तो वो भी आप हमें कमेंट सेक्शंस में पूछ सकते हैं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। टिल देन कीप वॉचिंग एंड कीप सपोर्टिंग द सोलफुल डायरी। थैंक यू।